My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and until last Friday, I was the only person legally responsible for the penthouse my family called home. At dinner, my father set down his wine and said, "Your brother and his fiancée are moving into the penthouse. Pack your things and leave, you parasite." I thought I had misheard him. "Dad just called me what?" I asked. He looked away first. Then he laughed. "Don't make this dramatic. They deserve this place more than you do." My brother leaned back in the chair I had bought. His fiancée rested one manicured hand over my father's wrist, as if he were the one who needed comforting. No one mentioned that my name was the only one on the lease, or that every rent payment for the previous 36 months had come from my account. They gave me until noon the next day. They even expected me to keep paying until my brother's new venture became profitable. So the next morning, while my father drove to their hotel to collect them and their luggage, I packed what belonged to me, paid the termination charge, surrendered the penthouse, and returned every key. At 12:18, they reached the private elevator. My father tapped his access card. Red. My brother tried his. Red. The garage pass, elevator credential, and service entrance code all failed. By sunset, my father had called me 73 times. His first message was an order. His last began, "Where are you? Please help." But the red cards were only the beginning. What happened during the next 48 hours exposed what they had really planned for me, and cost each of them far more than a view of Chicago. Before I tell you what Dad said in call number 73, and what happened after I stopped financing the people who had erased me, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. 3 years earlier, the arrangement had felt like love, not leverage. My mother had died after a short battle with pancreatic cancer, and my father, Martin Bennett, stopped functioning in every way that did not involve breathing. He left mail unopened, ate crackers for dinner, and replayed the same 14-second video of Mom laughing until his phone died. I was a senior risk manager trained to notice danger before it became expensive, yet I could not calculate a boundary with my grieving father. I had been preparing to buy a 2-bedroom condo. I had a pre-approval and a down payment fund. Dad begged me not to move him back to the suburban house where Mom had spent her final months. He said the silence there felt like punishment. So I withdrew my offer and signed an 18-month lease on a furnished penthouse in River North, close to his cardiologist and the lake path he promised to walk every morning. The rent was $8,700 a month before parking, utilities, and fees. Dad was an authorized occupant, but I was the sole leaseholder and the only person financially liable. I paid the deposit, rent, meal service, and a therapist he stopped seeing after 4 sessions. Dad used his pension for medication, golf, and personal expenses. We called it temporary. Then 2 renewals passed, and I could not bear to make my widowed father leave the last place where he seemed alive. There were nights when I loved him so fiercely that helping felt effortless. There were other nights when I ate alone at the kitchen island while he watched Mom's old videos behind a closed bedroom door, and the penthouse felt like an expensive monument to a woman neither of us knew how to mourn. I was tired, but guilt translated exhaustion into duty. I told myself I was preserving our family. I never admitted that I might also have been afraid that if I stopped being useful, I would stop having a place in it. My younger brother Ethan had no such fear. At 30, he moved from one ambitious idea to another, a fitness app, a luxury travel channel, then a creative strategy agency, with no clients. He called Dad every Sunday and me whenever an invoice was overdue. I lent him $6,000 for a certification he never completed. When I asked about repayment, he sent a thumbs-up emoji and disappeared for 2 months. Dad defended him with the sentence he had used since we were children. "Ethan is still finding his direction." Apparently, my direction was expected to include carrying everyone else. Ethan's fiancée, Sierra Cole, made lifestyle videos online. The The first time she visited the penthouse, she did not ask how I was. She turned slowly in front of the windows and said, "This light would make an incredible studio." A week later, she posted a photograph from my terrace with the caption, "Soon." When I asked Ethan what that meant, he laughed and said Sierra liked to manifest things. The first unmistakable warning came 6 weeks before that dinner. I found Sierra measuring the wall behind my desk while blue tape marked the floor around my bookcase. "What are you doing?" I asked, testing dimensions. "Your office gets better afternoon light than the guest room." Ethan told me not to make it weird. Dad said they were brainstorming. 2 nights later, I heard Dad speaking on the kitchen speakerphone while I stood unseen in the hallway. Ethan asked, "What if Claire refuses?" Dad answered without hesitation, "She won't make a scene. Your sister only knows how to sacrifice. Give her a few days, and she'll convince herself this was her idea." I backed away before they heard me. The sentence hurt because part of it was true. For 3 years, I had turned every insult into an explanation and every demand into a responsibility. I had confused being dependable with being disposable. The following morning, an $18,500 charge appeared in the shared household account. Dad had ordered a custom media wall, 2 designer chairs, and sound panels for Sierra's studio. Most of the money in that account was mine. When I confronted him, he called it an investment in Ethan's future and reminded me that I had a stable salary. He did not offer to replace the money. Instead, he asked me to be home Friday night because we were having a family dinner. By then, Sierra's measurements made sense. So did the caption. What I still did not understand was how completely they expected me to disappear while my money stayed behind. Ethan and Sierra had flown into Chicago and checked into a boutique hotel. The truth became obvious when they arrived for dinner with fabric samples, furniture catalogs, and champagne. They did not open until after the announcement. My place at the table had been moved to the end. Ethan sat at Dad's right hand. Sierra had a folder labeled Bennett House Launch. They talked around me while assigning business functions to rooms I paid for. Then he cleared his throat. "Claire, your brother and Sierra are moving into the penthouse tomorrow. You'll need to pack your things and leave." I waited for the sentence to become less absurd. "Leave for how long?" "Permanently," he said. "They're getting married. They need a proper home, and Sierra needs space to build her brand." Ethan finally looked at me. "You're never here anyway. You work constantly." "I work constantly because this place costs almost $9,000 a month." Dad's mouth tightened. "There you go again, reducing family to numbers." I looked from him to Ethan. "My name is the only one on the lease." Ethan waved one hand as if contracts were a personality flaw. "Dad lives here. Management knows him. We'll transfer everything later." "Later?" I asked. "Who pays until later?" Sierra adjusted her ring. Dad took a drink. The pause told me everything. Finally, Dad said, "You can cover the next couple of months. Ethan needs time to stabilize the agency. You earn plenty, Claire. It won't hurt you. So you want me out tomorrow, but you want my bank account to remain?" "Don't be vulgar," he snapped. "This is what families do. We help the people who need it most." I reminded him that I had paid 36 months of rent, abandoned my home purchase, and bought the furniture around us. I kept my voice level so they could not dismiss the facts as hysteria. Dad cut me off. "And you benefited from living here. Stop acting like a martyr. I moved here because you said you couldn't survive alone." "That was 3 years ago. I'm better now." He glanced at Ethan, then added, "You've become too comfortable. A woman your age should have her own life." I almost laughed. "I had one. I put it on hold for you." Ethan leaned forward. "This is exactly why we didn't tell you sooner. You turn every good thing into a debt." Sierra placed her hand over Dad's wrist and spoke in the soft, therapeutic tone she used in sponsored videos. "Claire, transitions can feel threatening, but sometimes loving people means making room for their next chapter." She wanted the home I financed. Ethan wanted the business subsidy. Dad wanted me to smile while they took both. When did you decide this? I asked. Ethan admitted they had planned it for nearly 2 months. Sierra had promised a sponsor that her first Penthouse video would go live Monday. Dad had told the concierge I was moving out voluntarily, but had never spoken to the company that owned the building. I looked directly at my father. You planned this for 2 months, spent my money, promised my home to them, and gave me less than 18 hours. What do you call someone who takes from another person's account while forcing her out of the thing she pays for? His face reddened. Enough. Pack your things and leave, you parasite. The room went silent. Dad just called me what? I asked. He could not hold my eyes. Sierra rubbed his wrist as if I had wounded him. Ethan gave a nervous laugh. Claire, don't perform. Dad recovered first. They deserve this place more than you. They're building a family. You're building spreadsheets. Something inside me stopped pleading. I did not throw the wine, list another payment, or ask him to remember the nights I sat beside his bed after Mom died. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and said, Understood. Dad mistook quiet for surrender. Good. I'm picking them up at 9 tomorrow. Be gone by noon, and leave the office furniture. Sierra needs it. I went to my room and locked the door. For an hour, I sat on the floor holding Mom's blue scarf, caught between grief and fury. Part of me still wanted Dad to knock, apologize, and tell me fear had made him cruel. He never came. Through the wall, I heard the three of them opening champagne and debating where Sierra's logo should go. At 1:40 in the morning, I opened my lease. Clause 18 allowed an accelerated surrender after the first full year if I paid a fixed termination charge and returned vacant possession. I read it 4 times. The charge would hurt. Remaining on the lease for them would cost far more. At 2:13, I drafted an email to the property director. At 2:18, I pressed send. Dad had called me a parasite. By sunrise, I had decided to remove myself completely, my belongings, my signature, and every dollar attached to it. The property director called me at 6:32. I had paid on time for 3 years, and the building wanted the unit for a corporate client, so management could process the surrender that day. The contract was unambiguous. I was the sole tenant. Dad's status existed under my tenancy and ended with it. Management would supervise collection of his belongings. I was not changing locks on property he owned. I was ending a contract I owned. The price was $19,400 paid from the fund once meant for my home. But 9 remaining months would cost over $80,000 before utilities, and Dad had shown me how much gratitude that money would buy. I approved it. At 7, 2 movers arrived. I took only what was mine: clothes, files, books, my walnut desk, and the photographs Dad had removed from the den. I left his property, including Mom's piano, his golf clubs, and the chair where he watched her videos. I packed Mom's blue scarf and recipe book because she had given them to me, then photographed every room for management. Every object forced a decision. The silver picture frame on Dad's nightstand was mine, but the photograph inside showed him and Mom on their anniversary, so I left it. I found a stack of birthday cards I had written him unopened in a drawer. I wanted to take them as evidence that I had tried. Instead, I put them beside his medication. I was not preparing a dramatic reveal. I was separating a shared life without stealing a single excuse he could use against me. While I packed, the family group chat performed a parallel version of the morning. At 7:18, Ethan wrote, "Don't take the desk. It fits the studio plan." At 7:41, Sierra posted a preview image captioned, "New home, new level, new legacy." At 8:06, Dad texted, "Try not to create an ugly scene when we return." None of them asked whether I had somewhere to sleep. At 8:37, I heard Dad in the kitchen telling Ethan on speakerphone that my silence meant I had finally accepted reality. Ethan asked whether I would keep covering rent through the summer. Dad said, "She'll complain, But she always pays. Sierra laughed in the background. The sound did not break my heart the way it might have one day earlier. It clarified it. Dad left at 8:55 to collect them from the hotel. He wore the jacket I had bought him for his birthday and carried the building's spare access card. Before entering the elevator, he looked at the boxes behind me. I expect everything finished by noon. It will be, I said. He smiled, satisfied, because he heard obedience where I meant finality. At 9:10, the movers took my belongings to a furnished studio I had reserved for 30 days in the West Loop. It was not the home I wanted, but it was clean, private, and available immediately. My colleague Nadia held the elevator while we loaded the final boxes. She knew only that I was leaving a bad family arrangement. When she asked if I wanted company, I said no. I needed to discover whether quiet felt different when it belonged to me. Before I left the penthouse, I printed 36 months of statements. Rent, parking, utilities, housekeeping, groceries, medical rides, furnishings, and the money Dad had spent on the studio came to $349,720. I placed the pages on his desk beneath a cover sheet. Financial support paid by Claire Bennett. Support ends with the lease. No speech, no insult. Just the accounting he had accused me of using against family. At 10:45, I met the property director in the leasing office. She reviewed the photographs, the payment receipt, and the signed surrender. A building employee confirmed that Dad's belongings remained intact. At 11:41, I placed 2 metal keys, 3 access cards, the garage pass, and the mailbox key on the desk. She stamped my copy received and told security to deactivate every credential linked to Unit 3901 at noon. For 1 second, my hand hovered over the last card. I remembered Dad teaching me to drive, Mom dancing barefoot in our old kitchen, Ethan asleep against my shoulder on a childhood flight. Ending the lease felt like admitting those memories could not protect me. I almost asked for another day. Then Dad's final text arrived. Make sure you leave champagne glasses out. Sierra wants arrival footage. I released the card. At 11:58, I walked out of the building with Mom's scarf in my bag and the stamped surrender form on my phone. At noon, the system closed my tenant account. At 12:18, while I sat on the floor of my temporary studio eating noodles from the carton, my phone lit up for the first time. Call 1 came from Dad. I watched his name vibrate across the screen and let it stop. A text followed. What did you do to the elevator? Call 2 came 11 seconds later. Then Ethan called. Then Dad again. By call 7, the messages had changed from confusion to command. Phone the front desk now. Tell them to reactivate us. This childish stunt ends immediately. Sierra sent a photograph of 3 red access cards lined up in her palm as if I needed proof. Voicemails, management emails, and Ethan's messages filled in the scene. They arrived in a rented SUV packed with luggage and studio equipment. Dad led them to the private elevator as if unveiling an inheritance. He tapped his card. Red. He tried again. Red. Ethan tried his card. Sierra tried the garage and service entrances. Every screen gave the same answer. The property director showed Dad the signed surrender and told him he could retrieve his belongings at 4, but no one could stay in a unit returned to the owner. At call 19, Dad stopped ordering and started bargaining. Claire, call me. We can discuss your feelings after you fix this. At call 26, Ethan left a voicemail accusing me of sabotaging his company. At call 31, Sierra said her launch partner had scheduled a photographer and asked whether I understood how unprofessional I was making her look. Not one message contained the words, "I'm sorry." I silenced my phone and made the narrow bed. I expected triumph. What I felt was grief with clean edges. I had wanted my family to stop treating love like an automatic payment. Still, each unanswered call returned 1 minute of my life. I slept 3 uninterrupted hours. When I woke, the counter showed 42. At 4, Management allowed them upstairs with security. They found the penthouse almost empty of me. My desk was gone. So were the dining chairs I had purchased, the espresso machine, the artwork, and every cable, lamp, or dish charged to my card. Dad found the statements on his desk. He photographed the cover sheet and sent it with one sentence. "How could you humiliate me like this?" I did not respond. A same-day mover charged Dad $4,600 to take his property to storage. 2 hotel rooms, deposits, parking, and meals cost nearly $3,000 in 48 hours. Dad expected Ethan to pay half. Ethan's business account held $412. That evening, the tone changed again. Dad wrote, "I may have spoken harshly." An hour later, "Your mother would want you to help." Then, "I cannot believe my daughter would leave her own father without a home." He had not considered me homeless when he gave me 18 hours. I remained silent for 48 hours. It was the only way to stop them from turning urgency into my obligation. They always created a crisis. I solved it. And my solution became evidence that it had never been serious. This time, I let reality finish its sentence. The quiet made their escalation impossible to miss. Anger became accusation became panic, and panic finally became the helplessness they had expected me to absorb. Had I answered call 3, Dad would have called the lockout a misunderstanding. By call 73, no one could pretend they had ever possessed the penthouse without me. On the second morning, Dad and Ethan tried to take over the penthouse lease. Management required verified income, credit approval, and a substantial deposit. Dad's pension did not meet the income threshold. Ethan submitted projected agency revenue instead of tax returns. Sierra refused to apply because she did not want a housing inquiry on her credit. The corporate client had already placed a hold on the unit anyway. There was nothing for me to reverse. Call 73 arrived at 11:52. I let it go to voicemail like the others. Dad's voice was no longer loud. "Claire, where are you? Please help. The hotel says we have to check out tomorrow. Ethan doesn't have the money he said he had. I can't get approved for this place alone. Call me, please." For one dangerous moment, I reached for the phone. His fear sounded like the man who had held my bicycle seat when I was 6. Then Ethan sent a message. "Answer us or I'll sue you for illegal eviction and destruction of property." The threat did what the pleading almost undid. It reminded me that they still saw my boundary as an offense against them. I sent one reply to all 3. Attached were the executed surrender, the building's property inventory, the collection schedule, and the section identifying me as sole leaseholder. My message read, "Dad ordered me to leave the home I paid for." I complied. "No property was withheld or destroyed. Your belongings are available through management, and council's contact information is attached. My financial responsibility ended when my residency ended. Do not contact my employer or come to my office." Ethan replied with 12 paragraphs. Sierra left the group chat. Dad sent only, "You planned this." I answered once more. "You planned my removal for 2 months. I read the contract overnight." He called from a different number that evening, and this time I answered. He did not apologize. He said I had embarrassed him in front of Ethan. He said family did not weaponize paperwork. I reminded him that family did not call a daughter a parasite while charging rent to her account. He asked me to pay for 1 month in a 2-bedroom suite so they could regroup. I said no. I emailed him a list of reasonably priced apartments, storage companies, and a nonprofit financial counselor. "That's all I am to you now?" he asked. "A budget problem?" "No," I said. "You're my father. That's why this hurts. But being my father no longer gives you access to my bank account." He hung up. The calls stopped. The red access card was a receipt. In one color, it showed the difference between the life they believed they owned and the woman financing it. Once that difference became visible, their alliance collapsed. The hotel lasted 9 days. Dad spent most of his emergency savings on rooms, storage, applications, and furniture he could not fully cancel. Without my income, he could not qualify for another luxury building. He rented a dated one-bedroom in Skokie above a dry cleaner. It was safe and within his pension. It was also everything he had spent 3 years insisting he could not bear. Ethan and Sierra moved in with him for 2 weeks. Sierra lasted 19 days. Her sponsor canceled the Penthouse campaign when she could not deliver the promised location. She had financed additional camera equipment and custom furniture on credit because she believed Dad's promise that the home was settled. When she tried to return the furniture, restocking and delivery fees left her thousands in debt. Their breakup was public. Sierra posted about choosing a partner with a plan, not just potential. In a deleted comment, she wrote that she had been promised a penthouse by a man who did not own a couch. Someone saved it, and Ethan's first luxury branding prospect backed away. The image he borrowed from my life became evidence he had no life of his own to sell. Sierra returned to the ring and moved to Los Angeles. Ethan stayed on Dad's pull-out sofa. The men who had agreed I was the problem now argued about groceries, storage, and whose lie started the disaster. By month 3, Ethan took a flooring showroom sales job because Dad refused to fund the agency. It was his first steady paycheck in 2 years. Dad's blood pressure worsened under the stress. He spent one night in urgent care after becoming dizzy, then started taking his medication consistently and meeting with the financial counselor whose number I had sent. When my aunt told me, guilt arrived so quickly that I had to sit down. I did not enjoy hearing that he was sick. I had never wanted to punish his body. I sent a card and offered to drive him to one follow-up appointment. I did not send a check. Therapy helped me see that caring about Dad did not require restoring the conditions that let him hurt me. His apartment was safe, and his pension covered his needs. He had lost luxury, authority, and the belief that my success belonged to him. Those were consequences, not emergencies. 4 months after the lease ended, Dad asked to meet at a coffee shop. He looked smaller without the penthouse around him. He apologized for using the word parasite, but then spent 10 minutes explaining how embarrassed and pressured he had felt. He said he had been afraid Ethan would leave again if he did not offer something impressive. He admitted that he assumed I would keep paying because I was the strong one. Strong people still feel betrayal, I told him. I know that now. Do you? If the elevator card had stayed green, would you have called me 73 times to ask whether I had somewhere to sleep? He looked down at his coffee. That was my answer. Dad asked whether we could go back. I said the old relationship translated love into rent and silence into consent. I offered a new version. 1 coffee a month, no loans, no shared accounts, no spare key, and no discussion of Ethan's expenses. He called it cold. I said boundaries feel cold to people living inside someone else's warmth. He accepted. Our relationship became smaller and more honest. Some months he complained. Some months he listened. Once he said Mom would have been proud of me. I thanked him without pretending it repaired everything. Ethan's first apology began with, "I'm sorry you felt," and ended 2 weeks later with a request for $3,200. I declined. Months into his showroom job, he texted, "I understand now what rent does to a paycheck." It was not redemption, but it was honest. My own life changed more quietly and more permanently. Without the penthouse draining my salary, I rebuilt the money used for the termination charge faster than I expected. I accepted a promotion to Director of Financial Strategy, a role I had once avoided because Dad said the travel would leave him alone too often. I moved from the temporary studio into a modest 2-bedroom condo with no concierge, no private elevator, and a mortgage payment less than half the penthouse rent. The first night, I ate takeout on the floor because my dining table had not arrived. I had never felt richer. Through a colleague, I began advising a small fund offering grants and financial coaching to women leaving controlling relationships. One participant asked why intelligent women stayed in obviously unfair arrangements. I told her intelligence did not cancel hope, grief, or conditioning. Sometimes the hardest account to audit was labeled family. That answer became the basis of a monthly workshop on financial boundaries. I taught women how to separate emergency funds, read leases, document contributions, and distinguish generosity from open-ended liability. I never used my family's names, but every time someone closed a joint account or signed a lease she understood, the worst night of my life acquired a purpose beyond revenge. 6 months later, Dad sold the oversized furniture to clear debt, and Ethan moved into a shared apartment. The Penthouse media wall never appeared in a video. It sold for less than half its price. Their plan ended item by item because none of them could afford promises made with my resources. At my housewarming, Nadia gave me a small red key tag as a joke. I almost threw it into a drawer. Instead, I attached it to my new keys. It no longer reminded me of 3 people trapped outside a luxury building. It reminded me of the moment I stopped standing outside my own life. That evening, while friends crowded around my ordinary kitchen table, Dad sent a photograph of a budgeting worksheet from his counselor. The old version of me would have called immediately, praised him, and offered to fix the numbers. I replied, "I'm glad you're doing the work," then returned to my guests. Across town, he was learning to live within his means. In my condo, I was learning that another person's progress did not require my supervision. For years, I believed sacrifice proved love. What I finally learned was that sacrifice without consent does not create family. It creates entitlement. Dad did not call me a parasite because I had taken too much. He called me one because the accusation made it easier to ignore how much he was taking from me. Ending the lease did not make me heartless. I made sure every belonging was protected, followed the contract, and gave Dad practical options. What I refused to provide was the one thing they considered automatic: unlimited access to me. Their financial losses, broken engagement, smaller apartments, and damaged pride did not come from a trap I set. They came from building a future on money, property, and obedience that were never theirs. The hardest part was accepting that a boundary can be both painful and right. Dad's frightened voicemail was real. So was the contempt at the dinner table. Ethan's embarrassment was real. So was his plan to use my salary after removing me from my home. Compassion did not require me to choose one truth and erase the other. I could care about their fear without volunteering to become its solution. I still love my father. I may even forgive him one day, but forgiveness will never again mean financing the conditions of my own disrespect. Love can leave a door open without handing someone the key. If there is one thing I wish I had understood earlier, it is this: being the capable person in a family is not a lifetime contract. You are allowed to resign from a role nobody asked whether you wanted. You are allowed to stop proving your love through exhaustion. And when people value your contribution only after it disappears, their sudden appreciation is not a command to restore it. I did not take back the penthouse. I took back something more important: the right not to be called a parasite in the home I had sustained, and the right to leave without continuing to pay for the people who pushed me out. So tell me honestly, if you were Claire, would you have quietly moved out within a week and kept paying until your family recovered? Or would you have done exactly what I did? And do you think the price my father, Ethan, and Sierra paid was too harsh?